Hello, everyone. Andrew Homer, Vice President of Business Development and Marketing at Morphisec. And today I'm talking to our customer, Rick Klotz, CIO of Altra, a publicly traded $2 billion leading global manufacturing company specializing in motion control and power transmission products. Have about 10,000 employees worldwide. And Rick, excited to have you here today. Talk about your role as head of IT and security and share some of the perspectives with your manufacturing peers. So thanks for joining.
Thanks, Andrew. Great to be here with you today.
Cool. So we've spent a good amount of time talking with each other about your role in the security challenges you face at Altra. And I think one of the trends that's interesting is breach occurrences is arising, right? Economic damage is increasing, and yet manufacturing companies in particular face a budget pressure. So how do you rationalize this trend? How does this influence how you formulate your own cybersecurity strategy?
Yeah, I think we kind of take a basic approach to it. We don't have a lot of headcount. We don't have a huge budget directed towards cybersecurity at this point in time. We just went through a transformational merger about 2 years ago, and it's a very practical approach of how can I repurpose spending, especially in the current economic situation. But we're very practical in looking for let's say things we know we can implement, things that we know don't come with an added burden of monitoring and responding to events, but truly kind of complement our Microsoft-centric view of what we run, what we understand, what we have expertise with. And so basic network security, hygiene as a starting point really doesn't cost you more than what you're already spending for Office 365. And so we were really looking for something that complemented that approach with Windows Defender, Defender ATP, and I think that's a very practical approach. We're a bit of a laggard in terms of security spend, so we haven't racked up a fortune in historical spending around IDS, IPS, and all these sophisticated SIM tools and vulnerability scanners and all this stuff. So that's good for us to kind of be in a position where I don't have to worry about all this legacy spend that I might have to write off or anything. I'm looking at today's world. I'm seeing more bad actors, more attempts to get in between people and take advantage of accounts payable or payroll processing, or try to impersonate my CEO to get people to do dumb things. Anything I can do to stop that and get people to understand that these basic human behaviors are weaknesses waiting to be exploited. That's where we've spent a lot of our time looking for, like I said, practical solutions that help us mitigate that human weakness.
Interesting. So really, it's about doing more with less and taking care of the hygiene stuff, I suppose.
Right.
First and foremost, almost as table stakes. But it's interesting in our discussion. It wasn't always that way, correct? I mean, in fact, you outsourced much of your security to a MDR, a managed detection and response tool.
Right.
A leading, Magic Quadrant EDR tool. So maybe share some of that experience. How did that go?
Interesting experience because it happened somewhat around the time of this merger, where we actually still kind of had two separate networks, two sort of different organizations trying to integrate and come together. And we experienced a significant event with one part of our business, which did have a managed EDR solution in place. And it was interesting because I took it and my team took it as a let's learn from this. Let's watch how the big boys do this, right? Ooh, managed endpoint detection and response. They have it, we don't. This ought to go really well. And it was just as much sort of a Keystone Cops sort of event even when you did have this tool, because you still had so many disconnects between the network guys who don't know anything about Active Directory and the desktop people who don't know anything about endpoint detection and response. And to watch these silos of thinking try to do basic problem solving and troubleshooting, by the time we got through the first 24 hours, I was like, okay, this is not productive. This is an expensive solution with no solution. Why would we expand this to new Altra, essentially double our spending? And we just saw how it works. And the handoffs between the two partners, the miscommunication internally, people reading signals that really had nothing to do with the event itself. We said, okay, let's just stop. We need something that prevents these kinds of things from happening. We're spending all this time and energy reacting to something that already happened. We can't do that. We don't have enough people dedicated to this function to spend all of our time on detection and response. Let's just stop it from happening in the first place. Is that possible? Which kind of led to the conversations again with Morphisec, leveraging an experience from earlier that year to come, hey, can you guys help us? I think you guys can help us. I liked your approach, this idea of sort of actively defending yourself against these bad actors. And immediately Morphisec popped into my head. We need to connect. We need to take this to ground and really understand what the tool could do for us.
Yeah, that's great. That's a great story. And I know you and I have talked about this, which is, part of your strategy of leveraging existing technologies, particularly being a Microsoft shop. This also factored in, right? Because out of the box integration, easy to deploy, easy to manage, maybe some perspective of not just preventing the bad attacks from happening in the first place, but also integration within your organization, particularly with Microsoft. Any sort of comments there?
Right. Well, I think again it was we need something that we can deploy quickly, because the contract was ending with the previous partners. And we needed to deploy it to twice as many endpoints as what we had currently under management with the old solution. We had two different ways of deploying software, and I didn't hear, oh, this is going to be 16 weeks and we're going to have to engage professional services. It was just, let's roll our sleeves up and let's figure out how to do this. And I would say, with a few challenges outside the United States around things like GDPR concerns in other geographies, we had the product deployed pretty much push button and up and running within 4 weeks from the time of agreeing to use the product to actually saying confidently, we have Morphisec deployed to 6,000 endpoints and 1,000 servers. That was pretty amazing to me, and we were actually able to communicate that to our executive leadership with confidence that we found the tool that we think is the right fit for us, and it's deployed, and all of our endpoints are being protected, and there's not a huge amount of overhead in managing the solution. We find out about threats because they didn't take hold, and we can look at it and say we prevented X number of events from occurring on Altra's network because we did pick the right product. It's complementary to the things we already had deployed from Microsoft. There's just a lot of satisfaction in that.
That's
and
great.
I'm not a guy that smiles a lot, and I smiled a lot after we got Morphisec deployed because it just started working. There wasn't a ton of time tuning and configuring and trying to figure out, well, how do I make this happen? It just ran out of the box.
Well, that's really satisfying to hear because we work pretty hard making our customers smile. So I appreciate that a lot. So you also sit on the MAPI Technology Council, MAPI standing for Manufacturing Alliance for Productivity and Innovation. It's a group of like-minded manufacturing, IT, and security leaders. In fact, you're the council chair. And you also share some pretty open stories with your peers around the challenges that you face, particularly in your manufacturing space. I guess in closing, what kind of advice would you give to your CIO, CISO friend even, faced with many of these challenges and might be leaning into buying, the herd mentality of buying the leader, right? The Magic Quadrant leader, feeling that they have this sense of security. What general advice would you give them? Just real quick around how they need to be thinking through their plan and their strategy around how do they reduce risk.
Yeah, well, kind of going back to an earlier point, I think you have to start with the basics. You have to start with network hygiene and really ask yourselves, have I done everything I could do with what I already have, like taking away administrative privileges for all end users? Not a happy thing. People are frustrated by that, but fundamentally, you've prevented elevation of privilege. I haven't picked a product. I haven't made any commitment to, an IDS, IPS solution, an intrusion detection supplier. I've just said, this is a good thing to do. So we really tried to think about all those basic things that we could do. And then you start to move kind of up the stack, which is I don't have a consistent endpoint detection and response strategy. The products that I currently have in my portfolio aren't what I want to keep. So now what do I do? Well, of course, you consult Magic Quadrants and Waves and all these different people to get perspective of the industry. But I think my advice continues to be, it's okay to see where the herd is going, but sometimes you have to say, well, the herd's going off the cliff. I don't want to go off the cliff. I'm not going to spend that kind of money, but I want a similar benefit. So there's somebody in that quadrant that's an up and comer that's taking a different approach and might be a better fit for us. So I don't know. I was trying to think of some way to connect it, this herd mentality to herd immunity, and I realized I was trying too hard to make that connection. But there's kind of a theme in there that, listening to other CIOs, other CISOs, sharing your experiences sometimes reveals that there's a better approach. You've collected all this information, you've read all the reports, you've listened to dozens of vendor presentations, but at the end of the day, go back to the basic blocking and tackling, look at what's already in your portfolio. And if you haven't used everything that's currently available to you before you go buy something else, just challenge yourself, think about it. And I think that, again, going back to a conversation that happened before we became a Morphisec customer, that happened to be with a circle of Morphisec customers at an industry event. And I heard that pretty consistently from another CIO, another CISO, just talking about how did you end up being a Morphisec customer? And it's really that basic. Just look at your portfolio, think about what you're trying to do, leverage your existing spend before you go shopping. And when you do go shopping, you don't have to always follow the herd. Mm-hmm. There might be a better fit for you. So I think we share those kinds of experiences on the MAPI Council, both at formal meetings and all during the year, because we are CIO peers, and somebody's always doing something interesting. So anyway, hopefully that's
great.
Some good perspective.
I think that's definitely some valuable insight for your peers, and sometimes doing the pragmatic things really well matter the most in terms of moving the needle. So thanks a lot, Rick. I really appreciate your insights. Thanks for joining me today. For those interested in learning more about these perspectives from Rick, we'll actually be co-presenting at the MAPI conference, mapi.net, on September 1st. So you can register either on morphisec.com or mapi.net. Once again, thanks a lot, Rick. It was a pleasure talking with you. Thanks for sharing these experiences, and we'll talk soon.
All right. Thanks, Andrew.